Oh boy. Okay, so I haven't made a movie in a long time, and this is very, very random, but I've just come back from watching How to Train Your Dragon Hidden World, and I really wanted to air some thoughts and opinions on it to sort of get them out of my system. So I thought, why not just do a little video? That is to say, this video will contain spoilers, and it's just me sort of airing some opinions while they're still in my head, and yeah. So, How to Train Your Dragon is easily my favorite animated movie. In fact, no, I'd probably say it's my favorite movie series of all time. And yeah, so going into this movie, this was easily my movie of the year. I mean, sure, there's Avengers Endgame, but this was the movie I was personally looking forward to the most, and I was very hyped for it. But at the same time, I was very anxious to see it end because I love the series so much. I've watched all the Netflix series, I've watched all the movies countless times, and I just didn't want to see it end. But I knew this was going to be the final one, unless Comcast say otherwise. But yeah, I was a bit nervous going into it. But yeah, anyway, so I went into the movie, and it started pretty much as I expected. It's where the movie left off in the last one. Burke is at peace after Toothless has become the alpha, and they're living their everyday life as you'd expect. And the movie basically starts with Toothless and his gang attacking a bunch of dragon slavers, as you've seen in the other movies, and you've seen a hell of a lot if you've watched the Netflix series, because it pretty much happens. That's pretty much the whole plot every episode. But yeah, so it's pretty much what I've seen before. And he frees a bunch of dragons, blah blah blah. But the actual point of this part of the story is Toothless keeps freeing dragons from slavers and then bringing them back to Burke as a sort of paradise. And as it's quickly shown, this is starting to become a bit of a problem because Burke is overcrowded with dragons everywhere, and Hiccup is sort of ignoring the problem and not dealing with it. And I immediately start realizing, so okay, I can kind of see where this movie's going to go, and I'm starting to already feel anxious to how this movie is going to end because I don't want to see a sad ending or even a bittersweet ending, and I'm just grinding my teeth already. But anyway, yeah. So the movie moves on. So the next part of the movie we see is our villain, which is Grimmel, and he is a villain I like because he is similar to another villain I like. Like my favorite villain from the whole series is actually not from one of the three movies. He's actually Virgo from the Netflix series, and the reason I like him is because in this world, basically everybody is sort of barbaric and a bit stupid, and Virgo, I liked him because he was sort of the opposite of Hiccup. He was a very intelligent, crafty and strategic person, and he was sort of the ultimate enemy to Hiccup. He just wasn't this big barbaric strong guy that Hiccup had to outsmart and defeat. He was actually a scary sort of villain who actually had plans and could even outsmart Hiccup from time to time. But this villain in this movie, Grimmel, he's like same as Virgo and Hiccup. He is very smart. He thinks. Unlike the other people in this sort of world, he isn't just a sort of stupid barbarian. He is a very smart and scheming person, and even more so than Virgo was in the series, he is the opposite of Hiccup. He is said to be the ultimate dragon hunter. Specifically, he is the hunter of night furies, and this is where it's very interesting because he tells Hiccup to his face that when he was young, probably Hiccup's age, he killed a night fury. And this is where you can sort of see he is exactly the opposite of Hiccup, because when Hiccup found Toothless, he had the chance to kill him. And what this villain is it's saying, what would have happened if Hiccup killed Toothless? He would have turned into this guy. And that's the sort of villain it is. And that is a very interesting villain to have in the movie, and I liked him for that. So the bulk of this movie is obviously Hiccup and Burke being under threat by this new villain. And his ultimate goal is simply he likes to kill Night Furies because, like, imagine if Hiccup killed Toothless. This guy is this villain is a scrawny, intelligent guy. He is literally Hiccup. So if Hiccup killed Toothless, he would have been like revered by the whole of Burke. And but what would have he done after that? It's like he's still not brawny, he's still not strong. How would have he proved it? And how do you top killing a Night Fury? There's a very high chance is that he would have to just try and keep killing strong dragons, namelessly. He'd have to keep killing Night Furies like this guy does, and that's probably what he did. He probably kept killing Night Furies to prove himself, and it sort of just became his thing where he was eventually obsessed with killing every Night Fury. And I think that's a realistic way of seeing where Toothless could have gone if he didn't change himself and those of Burke to revere dragons rather than hate them. And I think that's a very interesting thing to think about. But anyway, the movie is about him trying to manipulate Hiccup, and Hiccup isn't really used to like super smart enemies. Like I said, there's a Virgo, but the movies they sort of don't really take into account the miniseries that much into the plot. So it's sort of as if this villain he sort of throws Hiccup for a loop, and he's like, "Oh, we've seen these sort of guys before," and they're like, "No, you don't know this guy. He's relentless. He's smart. He'll do whatever he needs to do to get what he wants." And then from there, it's basically sort of a back and forth sort of thing where it starts off by looking like this guy has the upper hand on Hiccup because he sort of sneaks into Burke. But then it turns out, no, Hiccup saw him coming and they set a trap for him. But no, it turns out that he actually knew that was going to happen and it was all part of his plan. And basically each step of the way, this guy, it's all part of his plan. And it's also he can get both Night Furies and like he basically scares Hiccup into evacuating Burke. And it's just all part of his bizarre plan just to get the Night Furies. And yeah, that's pretty much the mid-section of the movie. And then as we start making it towards the final sort of part of the movie, we're introduced to the White Night Fury, or as they call it, the Light Fury. And she is, of course, the only other Night Fury we know of. And or Light Fury, sorry, but I think they are probably the same species, but you know, just a nickname. And so, as you probably would expect, Toothless is immediately taken by her, and it sort of leads up to this really amusing scene of Toothless and this Light Fury doing a sort of like a mating dance with Hiccup in the background, giving him these sort of directions, and it's just this really funny scene. And yeah, it's really cute, but behind it all, you wonder, how did this Light Fury escape? And you realise that it's the villain. He let her escape because she's trying to tempt out Toothless. And we sort of see how Hiccup is starting to realise this too. And he even like sort of makes a new tail spike for Toothless because Toothless is like completely distracted. Like the Light Fury leaves for a while and then they go back to their sort of day-to-day life. But Toothless is just completely distracted and he's acting crazy because all he can think about obviously is this Light Fury. And Hiccup just pretty much has enough, and he gives Toothless a new tail, so he can actually fly by himself. And this is sort of the tipping point, as you can sort of see where the movie is definitely going. And Toothless is immediately out of there pretty much to go see his new girlfriend, and Hiccup is sort of left behind. And I think both the audience and he can sort of, even though like, and sort of when I saw Hiccup standing there as Toothless had left him, I sort of felt like in the same spot as Hiccup, and I thought, please don't tell me this is where the movie's going to go, because Hiccup is sort of in denial. I think all the time he knows deep down that in the end he may just have to give up Toothless, but he's in denial about that, and he's just thinking, oh, he's just going to go and he's going to bring her back and we're going to be happy as ever. And I'm thinking, I know what this movie's going to do and I'm not going to like it. And this is sort of further shown as we see in the next act of the movie. Toothless and the Light Fury happen to find the hidden world hidden behind the magical waterfall, as told by Stoic in his stories he told Hiccup as a child. And there's all these amazing, beautiful, like, my god, like in the first movie you got the, like, one of the things that are amazing about this movie, of many things, like there's of course the animation and the soundtrack is beautiful, but just the frigging backgrounds and the setting, it's always beautiful. Like, one of my favourite scenes of any movie is where just Hiccup and Toothless are flying through the sky in the first movie to that incredible soundtrack. And in this one, probably the one that really hits home is where they go into the hidden world and it's just beautiful, and there's all these dragons and they sort of just like settle down there, and you're like, oh, this is, and again, going back to what I was saying, I'm like, no, please don't go down this route. It's not what I want to see, even if it, but yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. So shortly after this, we realise, oh no, Grimmel, this was part of his plot. He wanted to separate the Alpha, as in Toothless, away from them so he can attack and take all the other dragons. So they're about to get attacked and they're like, well, we need Toothless. And Hiccup is sort of two minds. He's like, he wants Toothless back, but he's starting to realise maybe he should just let him live his life now. And in the end, it's Astrid that's like, okay, I've had enough of this, Hiccup. Get on Stormfly here and we're going to go get Toothless. So they go flying and Stormfly seems to pick up on their scent or something, and she also manages to eventually find a hidden world. And they fly in, and I made a mistake. This is actually where you first really see the hidden world for all its glory. This is where the amazing shots were. Although I think you saw it a little bit before this when Toothless and the Light Fury found it, but this is where you sort of see it in all its grandeur as Stormfly and them are flying in and they're seeing it for all its glory and all the dragons. And they fly in and they land and they see Toothless and this Light Fury, and they're sort of the leaders of these dragons. And as they are silently watching, they sort of see a little sort of ritual with the Light Fury and Toothless. And this sort of leads back to another sort of subplot that's going, well, not even a plot, just a sub thing of the movie, where Gobber keeps telling Hiccup and Astrid that they should get married so they can all work together, because Astrid is sort of the one that keeps Hiccup in line. Hiccup is smart, but he acts a bit naive, and he's sort of a bit lost without Astrid to keep him in tow, and he wants them to get married, and they're like, oh, we're not ready and whatever. And this is it looks as if this is sort of like a marriage ceremony of the Light Fury and Toothless, and they're sort of leading over them. And I'm not sure if it was because he's sort of the alpha, but they sort of, all the other dragons are sort of looking up, and this was sort of so all the other dragons are sort of like looking up at them as they're sort of looking over all the dragons, and the dragons are all sort of bowing to them as if they're their new leaders. And Hiccup is sort of just like looking at him, and he's like, realization sort of dawns on his face, or not really realization, but his like sort of doubts and his what he was putting off sort of comes to light, and he writes, I have to give him up. And he's like, okay guys, let's go. And so they turn around, and oh no, there's this big dragon that spotted them, and there's this all commotion, and Toothless spots them, and Toothless is like, okay, and then he pushes all the dragons out of the way, and he takes Hiccup, he takes Astrid, and they fly out, and they return to Berk, or the new Berk at this point, which I won't really explain, but that's basically where they when they left Berk before, they're sort of on a new island at the moment. And Toothless basically looks like really, really down. He doesn't want to be there. He wants to be back with his new girlfriend. And so sort of Hiccup gets off, and he goes to Toothless, and he's like, Toothless, it's okay, I understand. You should be with her. But, oh boy, look. What's that in the grass behind you? Oh, look, it's the Light Fury. She followed us. Everything is going to be good now. We're going to live at Berk together and we'll all be happy. At least I would be happy. No, of course not. That's not what happens. Basically, the villain comes back into the story because, yeah, did you forget about him? And he just snatches up the Light Fury, snatches up Toothless, and all the dragons of Berk are like, "Oh, you're not going to steal our Alpha." And he points an arrow at the Light Fury and says, "Oi, Alpha, stop all these dragons from killing me." And he's like, "Oi, dragons, stop trying to kill this guy. My girlfriend's there. I don't want her to die." So he gets away with them because Toothless lets them get away, and Hiccup is just left standing on the cliffside, and he's like, "Toothless, no." So Hiccup is standing there, feeling like a bit of an asshole because he knows if he just left Toothless and didn't go and get him from the hidden world, he would have been safe. But no, he sort of fucked up and he's got him captured, and he's feeling a bit down. And then his mum tells Astrid, "He'll listen to you." So Astrid goes and talks to him, and in a normal way, she sort of just lets him beat himself up and agrees with everything he says. And it's sort of their normal banter because it's a really nice sort of drawback to, especially like the first movie where sort of Hiccup always like sort of criticizes himself, and Astrid is like, yeah, you're totally right, yeah. And then she says, "So, what are you gonna do now?" And he's like, "Probably something stupid." And she says, "Yeah, I thought so." And that is another lovely little callback because that's exactly what happened in the first movie, and I like that little scene. So, basically, he goes to them and says, "Right, we're gonna go save them." And of course, they're like, "Yes, we're gonna go save them," but they can't use their dragons because they know that Toothless will stop them. So they're like. So he looks up to his Berkians and he's like, "Okay, guys, screw it. We're going to go save them." And they're like, "What are we going to do without dragons? Because, Toothless will stop them if they use the dragons." So, of course, he does the only logical thing, and he takes him and his close friends and puts them on their little glide suits, and they just glide off the mountain, and they're going to go attack them with no weapons, no nothing, and, everything will work out fine. So, sort of at the same time as he's doing this, the Grimmel is sort of, because he was working with the all the dragon hunters, and he was going to give them Toothless as a prize for helping, because he's the alpha and that will allow them to control all the dragons that they've captured. But he says, "No, I was never going to give you Toothless. He's mine to kill because I am the Night Fury killer." Blah blah blah. But as he's giving this lovely monologue, he turns around and what do you know, Hiccup's there, gliding towards him, and so probably from just like pure shock, he gets knocked off his little flying machine that he has held up by his 4 dragon slaves, and then there's basically a big scuffle where they all fight, and they end up sort of freeing most of the dragons, and Toothless is like, "Okay, guys, now you can fight." So all the dragons that were caught. So at this point, Hiccup is trying to free Toothless and the Light Fury because they're sort of chained up still, and he manages to free Toothless, but Grimmel shoots Toothless with his dart gun, and he starts plummeting to the ground. And then they're sort of dangling from this the glider thing, and then Hiccup manages to free the Light Fury, and they're sort of still hanging, and he's like, "Save him." And then he lets go because he has to let her go save him. And so the Light Fury goes and saves Toothless and drags him onto a nearby cliff. And it's sort of this dramatic falling of Hiccup and Grimmel. And it's a very sad moment where it looks like sort of Hiccup sacrificed himself, and it's a very sweet and touching moment. But that's not really going to happen. And of course the Light Fury, although I thought it might be Toothless, but of course he was still drugged, comes and saves them. And it's a lovely moment because you think, she's accepted him, so this is all going to end happily, right? No, of course not. Well, at this point I really wasn't sure how it was going to end, but it was a lovely touching moment. And at this point the Light Fury has got Hiccup, and of course Grimmel is still there. He's holding on to Hiccup's leg, and as I'm sure pretty much everybody saw coming, Hiccup takes off his leg and sends Grimmel flying to the ground. And the Light Fury takes Hiccup to safety, up by Toothless, and then all the dragons come around, and there's this lovely touching reunion, and they're all happy, and I'm like, okay, this will be a lovely ending. Yes, let's just have a happy ending. Everybody lives at Berk. The end. Yeah. No, can't have that. So here it is. Here is a bit I was really dreading from the beginning of the movie. The bit where Hiccup does what's right. He goes up to Toothless and he's like, Toothless, you have to go. I love you and all this, and I can't remember the exact words, but he's like, you need to go be with her. It's where you belong. And the thing that gets me is he outright says to Toothless, which I will mention this again because it sort of is part of the bit I dislike about the message. He outright says to Toothless is, we don't deserve you. And that is a very, very fitting message, which I'll mention again in a minute. But anyway, so yeah, it's a very touching moment, but also very sad because it sort of drags out a little bit, and then it sort of drags out a little bit, and then Toothless lets out a mighty roar to command all the dragons, and he flies off with his new queen and takes all the dragons and Berk to the safety of the hidden world. And that's pretty much where the movie could have ended. I would have been incredibly mad if it did, because I'll get to that in a minute, because that's sort of the reason I wanted to sort of make this video. But yeah, so they fly off, and then Hiccup's like very sad, of course, but he knows it's the right thing. And shortly after that, it sort of starts summing it up, and it's sort of a bit of a monologue over the thing saying, once there were dragons, but now there are not, basically. Like, he's basically saying that over time everybody's forgotten dragons exist. And I'm like, oh, so they really are doing this. Now, the thing I really, really hate, specifically in fantasy, because I love fantasy, and the thing I love about fantasy is, to watch fantasy, you watch it because you get sucked into a different world. You don't watch fantasy because you want to watch everyday things. You want to get sucked into it because it's something unreal. It's something to take you out of the dreary life of everyday life and reality. And what I always hate in so many fantasy settings is they always have to end with some moral message about growing up and moving on, and about how... And it's really looking like that's what this movie's message is. It's saying that Toothless had to move on, he had to live his own life, Hiccup had to grow up, he had to embrace his life as chief, and they couldn't live together because, reasons, because they had to just grow up, and humans and dragons can't live together because reasons. Basically, what they're saying in the movie is, if the dragons continue to live on Berk, they're always going to be hunted, they're always going to be fighting dragon hunters, so the only possible solution is for the dragons to disappear. And to me, that is saying the ultimate moral of this story is, no matter what, humans will always be humans. And that is what I hated at this point in the movie. It really bothered me. Because the first movie, it was really a nice message to me. It was, here are these Vikings. They are horrible barbarians that kill dragons because they don't understand them, and basically their whole war is this misunderstanding. But here is Hiccup. He is a young boy who has a different way of seeing the world, and he has turned these people around to see the true side of dragons, and you can live together in harmony. But then this movie, it was starting to look like they were turning it around to say, well, I guess we have to sum up the movie now, so we're going to go full circle. You know how in the first movie we said that Berk was full of barbarians that eventually started to learn to like dragons because it was all a misunderstanding? Well, it turns out that no, that's just Berk. They're just a very small minority of humans. No matter what, there will always be humans that will hunt and kill the dragons because they are small-minded, naive, arrogant, destructive, and selfish beings that can never ever live in peace with dragons because they are humans. And that is the moral of our story. And yeah, I get it. The real message of the story is sometimes you have to give things up. Sometimes you have to lose. Sometimes you lose people. You can't, life is like that. But that is what I hate about fantasy stories. Like, my biggest example is Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki, and the way he writes his stories. He writes fantastic stories, and he does it intentionally, so I can't really fault him. But like, his movies like Spirited Away and probably a better example of this one, maybe like The Cat Returns, where sort of main character goes into a fantasy world and the whole story is about them going through this lovely fantasy adventure, but in the end they have to leave that fantasy world behind and grow up and mature and get back to reality. Like, okay, yeah, I guess it's just a story of children growing up, but why? Why does this story have to be that way? Why does it have to have that message? In The Cat's Returns, why can't she go back to visit her friends once in a while? In Spirited Away, why can't she go back there to visit once in a while? Why does it have to be that way? Why, when I watch this fantasy movie to escape reality, why does it have to have a deep sink message about the horrible truth of reality where things suck, get used to it? No, I watch fantasy to get sucked into the world. I don't care if she has to grow up. I just want to see her happy and have friends and all of this. And it's pretty much the same thing here. So if that's where the movie ended, I would have been furious. I would have understood it, but I wouldn't have been happy because I hate when messages are forced down your throat just to make a nice message to kids saying, kids, get used to it. Life sucks sometimes. You have to give things up. It's not always a happy ending. Screw that shit. I want a happy ending. I want a nice happy ending. I got into this movie because I saw a lovely story of a boy who changed the way of thinking, and there was a lovely story of humans and dragons living in harmony. Why can't the movie end like that? You don't have to shove the stupid ass message down your throat. So basically, after the goodbye of Toothless, they go to a little bit into the future where Astrid and Hiccup do their marriage ceremony, and again I go back to this. Oh look, Hiccup has grown up. He doesn't need his little dragon anymore. He's a man now. Isn't that a good message, kids? And yeah, and then whatever. And then it goes a little bit further into the future, or I should say probably maybe 5 years, because oh look, they're on a boat. He's got that beard that you probably saw in the trailer. And he's got kids with Astrid now, and they're sitting on this boat together, and it's like, oh, this is where the movie's going to end, isn't it? He's grown up now. He doesn't need his little dragon. He had that was as he was when he was a kid. He's a man now. He's a big grown-up Viking. He doesn't need his dragon anymore. And this is really run home by the monologue that's telling us how in these 5 years, dragons once existed, but now they no longer exist because they've gone to hide in their hidden world, and over time everybody's forgotten they ever existed. And as we get that monologue and they're on the boat and you think the movie's going to end, we see a cliff, and oh look, there's Toothless and the Light Fury, and a couple of little baby Night Furies. And this was really where I thought the movie was going to end. I thought, oh, he's just going to see them and then they're going to disappear behind a cliff like the generic ass fantasy movie saying, goodbye Toothless, I'll never see you again. All these movies and I'm never going to see you again. And that's how the movie's going to end, because it's a lovely moral and it just shows that we've matured, you've matured, we've all moved on. We don't need to be happy together because, that's the important thing here. We have to have a good moral. Screw a happy ending where we can sort of be together. That can't happen because humans are scum and I'm a grown man now, so I don't need my dragon. And I really thought that was going to end. And honestly, I'm not even convinced now that that wasn't the original ending, because the bit that comes after feels, maybe it's just me being really negative about how I felt watching it, and I was so scared of having this ending. But it felt a bit sort of retconned, and I'm half convinced that it was either added on to please the audience like me, who would have been incredibly angry with that ending, Or maybe it was sort of forced on by Comcast saying, hey, you cannot complete this movie and leave it closed. We want an open ending so we can potentially make more movies or Netflix series that we can cash in with. And yeah, so the movie doesn't end there. As would happen with any other fantasy movie, specifically if it was a Studio Ghibli movie where it's all about the message, no, Toothless spots Hiccup and he flies over, and there's this really, well, quite a nice little scene where he's got his sort of wild eyes, like he did at the very start of the first movie, where he sort of sees Hiccup and he's like, is he not going to recognise him in his beard and his, like, it's been so many years, is he wild now? And no, don't be silly. He walks up to Toothless and they sort of cuddle and they lick each other. Well, Toothless licks him at least. And yeah, and then Astrid is over at the back of the boat with the kids and he's like, it's okay, they're friends. And then there's this lovely bit where Hiccup calls his kids over and says, put your hand out. And then it sort of redoes the scene with Toothless putting his head against the hand to sort of, yes, a new generation of humans and dragons understanding each other, and it's a nice little message. And it could have left it there, and I would have been quite happy. But they sort of leave on another little monologue after that about how it is actually still the case that everybody's forgot about dragons, but everyone but Burke apparently, because apparently like the dragons visited Burke. Or maybe they only Toothless. No, because actually Stormfly comes back as well, because it shows that Astrid doesn't Stormfly. So I guess the dragons purely visit Burke, and no other human has ever seen a dragon flying from between the Hidden World and Burke or something. And they're trying to say, dragons have hidden from the world, but it's Burke's secret. We live happy together. And it felt such a weird message that, like, it made sense before where, like, if Hiccup just like gave up the dragons, he would probably be like, that would be the last line of dragons. They live in the hidden world. Eventually humans would forget about them. That would make sense. But in this is saying, but Burke went on to interact with dragons, but they're still forgotten. It's like, yeah, it kind of feels a bit retconned and added on to me. And that kind of bothers me. So yeah, maybe I'm just overthinking it a bit, but I just adore this series so much. It's easily my favourite series of all time, and I went into this so excited yet so anxious, and literally through a lot of the movie I literally actually felt anxious and I was sad and I actually even cried a little bit. And I think if I went to watch it again I could probably enjoy it more. Now I know how it ended and I could probably like analyse it a bit better. But I had such mixed feelings coming out of this and about how the ending is and all of this, and just how much I hate watching movies where they just have to have that message beat into you and like, no, you can't have that happy ending because that's not how it would happen in real life. Well, this is a fantasy world, a fantasy story. Why the hell can't it have a happy ending? The whole point of fantasy is to ignore the shitty real world and enjoy a nice fantasy movie. If you want to do a story about real life, then do a story of real life. Do one of your shitty like sitcoms of dramas where people do shitty human things. I want to watch a movie about a kid and his dragon. I don't need a message about him growing up and giving up his dragon. I don't need a message about anything like that. I just want a movie about a kid and his dragon. That's it. That's all you really need. Like, does every story have to have a message to be good? I mean, I know the first one was, I guess it was good because it had its message about humans changing and seeing dragons. And I liked that so much because it is a complete parallel to this world where humans like treat so many things so badly. Like all the wild animals, they've either been hunted to extinction or or the last of the population are in zoos because humans look down at them as inferior species. And even in our own species we treat each other like shit. Where am I going with this? Well, anyway, that's my little rant. I feel better after going through all that. I just wanted to air some thoughts because I really am sort of very attached to this series, and I would like to adamantly say I did not remotely think this was a bad movie. It was just me sort of airing my general hatred of the way some stories are written. And I don't think this is one of those stories. I think even if it did end where you saw the kid Night Furies and that was it, I would have been very upset, but I would have accepted it in the end because it would have left it as a good story and it would have been a good message. It's just me personally, I don't feel it's needed to add these messages. I personally watch fantasy to escape reality. Why can't there just be a happy ending? Why do we need to always have those stupid messages? So yeah, well, I guess I'll leave it there. Sorry if this dragged on and I sort of ranted a lot. I just wanted to air some of my thoughts. And I would love to hear some of your opinions if you want to comment below. And by all means, comment on anything I've said. Tell me off for anything I've said that's wrong and how I've completely misunderstood the movie and how I'm an idiot, whatever. I'll happily read all the comments. So yeah, thanks for listening and see you later. Bye.